Hi there, it's Jonathan Perps, founder and CEO of Scale Up Growth Partners again. Welcome to our Stories of Scaling Up series, where I chat with owners, managing directors, founders, and business leaders of scaling companies. It centres around their entrepreneurial journey so far and their aspirations for their companies. Today, I'm taking great pleasure in speaking to Ian Hyman, who's CEO of Hymans Valuers Auctioneers. Welcome.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I should say.
Yeah, welcome. So let's start with, Hymans Valuers and Auctioneers. What do you do, and how long have you been doing it for?
Well, a very long time. My family was in the valuation and auction industry from the early 60s, and in 1984, I was a young budding chartered accountant. My older brother, who was in the industry of valuations, rang me one day and decided he was going to leave the family business, which he was the managing director of, leaving a brother and two cousins, and would like to set up a new company with me. So I was working in the insolvency space at that stage, and I followed very hard, and we've always had a pretty good relationship, very good relationship, in fact, and I said, yes, let's do it. No thought, just jumped in. And so we were partners for about 15 years. There was a 10-year age gap, and at the end of that process, he decided to semi-retire, and I decided to carry on. So I've actually been, if you like, without partners since 1999, so 23 years, and longer than I was in partnership with my brother for. But look, the business has evolved enormously in that time, but fundamentally now we do valuations of property, plant and machinery businesses. We auction plant and machinery as well, all over Australia and New Zealand. And it's been a fantastic business. It's a really interesting business because every day is something new. I mean, we literally could be down doing a gold mine today, doing a transport company tomorrow, doing a private hospital the day after, doing a retirement village the day after that. So there's no 2 days the same. Every day is different, and I think that's what keeps staff in the industry for as long as they are. You find a lot of people on the plant equipment side, the guys stay in the industry for 20, 30 years, and they don't tend to leave because it's just such an incredibly interesting job to do.
Great. So tell me, who would be your core customer, your best customer?
Look, our best customers are the ones that pay on time and recognise that we need a margin to operate. Without question, the non-bank lenders are probably our best customers, and I say that not with disrespect to the major banks, and we're on a number of their panels, but they really they don't have the teams of economists, the industry information that the big banks have got, for example, feeding them information every day. So the non-bank lenders, some of whom are very large, often rely on us to be their eyes and ears out in the marketplace. So they're looking for relationship-based valuations. We pride ourselves on being, if you like, a collegiate or collaborative valuation firm where our goal is to try and help you get to where you need to be, and whether that's using a different basis of value or telling you how to improve the value of property or plant equipment to get it to another level. All of those things are within our bailiwick when we're working with a lot of these clients. So they're probably the non-bank lenders. We're on about 60 non-bank lender panels for property and about 30 for plant and equipment. So it's a very big part of our business. Having said that, our highest margin is in the area of litigation and insolvency, family law, those areas where if things go wrong, you're going to end up in court. And a lot of our competitors don't want to be in that litigation space, and we're very comfortable there. But it's obviously a bit more stressful, and sometimes you can wait very long periods of time to get paid because until assets are converted to cash, there's often no money in the administration. So, yeah.
So we've all been through the pandemic. What actions did you take during the pandemic that have stuck with you going forward? With the business.
Yeah, sure. Look, we did a number of things. Firstly, I've always had a fairly unstructured approach to people being at the office. I mean, most people came in, 3 or 4 days a week, but it was really, if they had a job and they were at the office for half a day, we'd always say, just go home and work from home if you're comfortable with it. Not that you had to, but if you're comfortable. We made sure that most of our staff had notebook computers. A number of them we'd already purchased prior to COVID, desks and chairs and things that were suitable for working at home because they living in a small apartment may not have had that sort of equipment. two monitors for home, two at the office, so they didn't have to split things around, so to speak. But when COVID hit, we basically said to the staff, obviously, work from home, and for the bulk of them, even now, they work from home 5 days a week. So we haven't reintroduced any requirement for staff to have to come to the office. If they're in a mentoring role, yes, obviously they need to come in as often as required. But with Teams and Zoom now, it's so good that in a lot of cases, that information can be shared online. And for some of our staff that have got elderly family that live with them, or they've got young kids that, they're sick more often than they're well, it really does provide them with that flexibility to, and I think they're grateful for that flexibility, and we trust them. There's some great management tools around now, so we know when the guys are working. If they're not working, most of our work is quoted, so if we're somebody's working at double the amount of time on a job consistently, something we need to look at. But we really haven't experienced any of those issues right through COVID. We may next year reintroduce maybe a 1 day a week rule where for each team they should come in 1 day a week just to maintain social relationships and maybe to have a lunch or a breakfast or, as part of that process. But I think that's probably been, the major change in the way things have been done. I think also, whereas in the past we've done a lot of telephone calls, to clients, we are finding that Teams is or Zoom is a better avenue to do that. So again, it just takes the communication to a different level. Initially, the calls were a lot longer. I think people felt that you needed to speak longer on if you had a video call, but now you can have a 5 or 8 minute, 10-minute call quite easily. And I think it does provide a better channel for communication when you can look people in the eye, in particular, whether it's a staff meeting or a client meeting. So a lot more of those. Most days I have 2 or 3 Teams meetings, which prior to COVID, that might have been once every 6 weeks. That's been a big change. I think the other thing, of course, is the increase in cybersecurity, in investing in security for our IT. We've spent a lot of money because now that everyone is working from home, local area networks, all those things. So we have had just a seismic shift in the way that we deliver IT to our staff and the access that we give our clients. Probably been one of the biggest capital items that we've had to spend money on. And we're under a lot of pressure, particularly from the banks and non-bank lenders, to achieve ISO 27001. I don't know that we'll necessarily go all the way to that, but we'll be very close sort of by March, April next year. So all of our servers are now gone. Everything's up in the cloud with SharePoint. We've got new firewalls being installed before Christmas. We've got a new customer relationship database going in before Christmas. We've brought in a new accounting system, new timesheeting system through COVID as well. So we've done a lot of work in our IT systems, which has been one of the reasons we've seen such an incredible leap in, I guess, profitability over the last couple of years. It's made us so much more efficient.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's interesting. In one of the interviews I did last week, I'm a mental block, but he was talking about he felt that personally his productivity had increased dramatically because, pre-COVID, he'd jump on a plane, Melbourne today for one meeting, off to Adelaide for another meeting, Brisbane, Perth, whatever. And the amount of time he spent getting to airports, getting on planes, etc., that downtime of productivity that he's picked up without the travel has been, and his organisation has picked up, has been significant.
It's also very expensive. And I travel to Brisbane and Melbourne once a month. I was doing Perth as well, and in times gone past, I was doing New Zealand once or twice a month as well. Look, it's not just the time; it's also the cost and the fact that it takes a physical toll. I've always been a workaholic my whole working life, but I tell you, catching a red eye back from Perth, having a shower at the lounge when you arrive in Sydney, and going straight to the office. You've got to be resilient, and I did that for 10 years.
Yes, I grew up. Back in the corporate days, I used to do the same, and it's like, I'm very lucky now. My commute, lucky enough, we bought. I live in Barrel, and we bought a house here, and we were able to buy the one next door. So my commute is literally I jump the fence, and it's just phenomenal. I love it. But
you're very lucky, mate. You're very lucky. You have a great vision to do that. So well done.
Mm. Yeah. So listen, moving on. What does the future look like, and what do you see as the main challenges for you going?
Look, people without question is the main challenge. Unfortunately, on the plant and equipment side, for example, nobody wakes up in the morning at school or university and says, I want to be a plant and machinery valuer. There's no, tertiary qualifications, no universities running degrees. So we have to rely on overseas organisations like the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors out of the UK.
I'm a fellow of that.
Well, mate, well done. You're an elite. But those qualifications haven't been offered in Australia until quite recently, and even then, they're remote. You've got to go to Melbourne for the ASA course, and it's a little bit challenging, but it's not promoted. So our industry is quite unknown. On the property side, it's a little bit better, but the problem with property is, unlike plant equipment, it's not different every day. If you're doing residential valuations and you've been doing it for 10 years, you want to go out and slash your wrists. If you're just doing 200-metre industrial boxes every day and you've done that for 10 years, you probably want to go and jump off a tall building. So property is a bit different. So we lose a lot of people out of the profession who are very capable but just get bored. So they end up in property management. They end up with funders. They end up with private equity positions. And as a result, we lose a lot of value. So trying to keep them interested and to get them involved in the marketing and get them off the tools at least a couple of times each week, so that their brain is simply not frying from, the rapidity of some of that work. Now, there's more complex valuation work, obviously, and we do some, land subdivisions, and we do private hospitals and aged care facilities that they're at a different level. But for the bulk of the valuations that come through the door, they're commercial style valuations, and they're very similar to the last one. So maintaining interest in our staff is a bit of a challenge, and the university degrees are 4 years. It's a long course to become qualified as a property valuer, even though there's no requirement to do anything to become a plant and equipment valuer. It's a bit like being an accountant. You hang up your shingle tomorrow and you're a plant and equipment valuer, no qualification required. So for it's quite a challenge. So not only have you got the 4 years, then you've got to get your API accreditation to be able to value. So there's some barriers to get into it, and then you've got this issue of boredom on the way through. So people, unquestionably, at the moment, wages are just ballooning. It's very, very challenging out there, and our staff are getting phone calls, not on a daily basis, certainly on a weekly, fortnightly basis, wanting to see if they're interested in moving for more money. And so that's, for a small business, that's a challenge.
Yeah, unfortunately, no man is an island. Pretty much every one of these conversations I have with business leaders, they're facing the same challenges.
Yeah, I'm going to say, John, but there is one other challenge that isn't talked about enough, and that's payroll tax. Payroll tax is a challenge. We work in 3 states now, but at different times we worked in 4 states plus Canberra. And in this country, most people aren't aware, but the payroll tax system is a state-based system. So for the privilege of employing people, we pretty much pay 80% of our payroll, and that equates to about $12,000 a month, so about $150,000 a year. It is the most regressive tax anywhere in the world. When you go overseas and you talk to accountants and lawyers and you ask them, what is your rate of payroll tax, they are incredulous. They cannot believe that any government would put a tax on payroll. And that has an impact, particularly for our manufacturers and exporters, that they've got a 5% loading on anything from sort of 30% of their costs up to maybe 50% of their costs that every other manufacturer they're competing against in the international markets don't have to compete with. We could take on 2 more graduates if it wasn't for payroll tax. And it's just not something that the federal government or the state governments talk about. It was supposed to go, as you may recall, when the GST was implemented back in 2000, all of the state governments broke their promises. Not one of them kept their promise. And I think that's a challenge, not just for us, but it's a challenge for every small business.
That's a really good point. I don't know how many ministers are listening to this show, but hopefully at least one is somewhere. So you've been a business owner for a substantial period of time. What do you think has been your biggest learning as a business owner?
Look, after 40 years, it's hard to distill that into one. And I've learned, I've touched the hot stove on about 100 occasions. I've come away with first-degree burns on about 80 occasions. I think the critical thing at the very beginning is to make sure your structure's right. We've had good times and bad times, and certainly when times have been difficult, the structure that we, because I was a chartered accountant, I understood the importance of separation of different parts of the business, from assets to payroll and other intellectual property assets. It meant that on occasions when things have been very difficult, I've been able to find solutions that didn't involve me necessarily having to close businesses down. And I think that structure is very important before you literally open your front door. Go and get the right advice from the right tax accountants. You'll have to pay for it, but I guarantee it will save you money when you consider how many businesses don't make it past 2 or 3 years from the start. So I think that structuring aspect of it is really important. I think the other thing to understand is that I've learned is that some team members are worth 3 times other equivalent team members. So people in the same role within your business, there is an incredible difference. And some
just lost Ian.
Some of the, sorry.
So, Ian, we just lost you. Could you start that one again, please?
Yeah, sure. So, I've just lost my train of thought now. We moved on from the
So we did structuring.
Yeah. So just going back to, do you want to go back to the start of the structuring?
No, we got all the structuring, then you went on to the second point.
So I'm just trying to...
biggest learning?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry. Sorry. Okay, so my second biggest learning is that the difference in value of employees. And you can have 2 people performing the same role, and one person is literally worth 3 times more than another. And the learning from that is that if somebody's worth 3 times more, pay them 3 times more because somebody else will. And for a long time, I felt that it was inappropriate to pay different team members who are performing the same tasks substantially different salaries. And it's something that I've changed my view on some years ago now, but over a long period of time, that if the best people are so impactful on your business, you can't afford not to pay them what they're worth, and they will pay back many times over a course of years. So that's probably the second great learning, I think. And overall, it's been, as leaders we talk about listening. We'll talk about all those management books that are out there that we all read and we absorb some of those learnings and some we don't. But I think listening is such an important part, and that took me a very long time. I'm a very hyper sort of person. When I started as a young accountant, I'd finish everybody's sentences. I knew what they were going to say before they said it. And even when I was right, and I was probably right a lot of the time, it takes away from a lot of people that ability to respond to you. They feel almost intimidated by your intellect, by your speed of your mind. You do need to listen really carefully and then in response make sure that you're on the same page, that people actually understand the point you're making. And sometimes I was talking, but people were not understanding what I was saying. And it's taken me a long time to learn that. It just wasn't natural for me. So, the whole listening thing is you want to form really solid relationships with your staff, be a great listener, and the rest will follow.
3 very, very good points. Thank you. Tell me, do you think of the word successful? Who pops to mind, and tell me why, please?
Look, the word successful is, or success, I tend to think of in terms of politics. I love the political concept of success because there's so little of it. But I think the person that's been a hero for me for a very large part of my life is Nelson Mandela. And really, his achievements are almost unique in world history. We've had maybe a couple of others like Gandhi who are in the same league, but to take the punishment that he took and to come out of prison after a quarter of a century and be able to forgive and move on and rebuild his country, to me that is success defined at the highest level. And so for me, Nelson Mandela is a man that I often I won't say that I try to put myself in his shoes, because you could never do that, but I certainly sometimes think to myself, if Nelson Mandela was in this situation, how would he respond, particularly if I'm frustrated or angry about something, because he always seemed to find a way around the anger, the bitterness, the desire to verbally retaliate, if you like, which I think is an amazing quality. He's the man.
Fabulous. Now, are you a reader? Are there any business books, podcasts, biographies that you'd recommend?
I love reading. It doesn't happen a lot unless I'm on holidays. I normally, one of the things I discovered about 15 years ago was a Kindle, and I take it everywhere with me. I tend to read it on takeoffs and landings on the plane, because I work when I'm on a flight, and it's often sitting around it before I go to bed, and I'll read 10 or 15 minutes before I go to bed each night. Mm-hmm. I do like management books, and I like autobiographies in particular. They're the things I read the most. I'm a bit of fiction as well. I've just finished reading The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Yep. I thought that was a terrific book, and I've actually given it to a couple of people in accounting practices who have talked to me about how hard it is to get their partners on the same page with them. I just think there's some great learnings there, and it's such a structured way of dealing with, I guess, a lack of mutual respect within your business. And that's what it basically comes down to, and that's something I just love. I recently reread Steve Covey's, the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Again, that book is as relevant today as it was back then. I think the wonderful thing about being in business is that you are in charge, and I think that's the first habit of his. That he believes highly successful people. I've always liked to think that I'm in charge. Sometimes the bank's been in charge, but most of the time I've been in charge. And in those situations, you've got if things go wrong, you really got to look at yourself in the mirror and go, okay, I've been in control. I've made the decisions, and now I've got to stand either by the wonderful success that they bring or the misery that they bring. And the last one is not really a reference book, but I recently read Peter Fitzsimon's book on James Cook. Okay. Which is quite a long term, and I never had an understanding of just what an incredible man James Cook was. And in an era where obviously the aristocracy in England and the view of the lower class as being almost expendable, if they weren't considered that way in full, he travelled the world going to into different cultures with a view of trying to maintain peace. And it was very unfortunate. He died in Hawaii at the hands of very unexpected. There was no cause for any concern on his part, but suddenly he got attacked and he was killed. But he'd been through many cultures, and even when he came to Australia with the Indigenous people here, which he didn't understand their thinking because they were unlike any other culture that he'd come to. The Aborigines just simply weren't interested in Cook, and they weren't interested in his ship. They weren't mesmerised by it. They just ignored it. And he tried very hard and succeeded eventually in forming a relationship with our Indigenous brothers, and to the point where he travelled up and down the east coast of this country and was able to almost communicate with them and form some relationships with them. So I thought he was an extraordinary man. He mapped basically the east coast of Australia at a level that lasted for a couple of hundred years before those maps were superseded. There are maps of the coast of Canada and the US, which were used up until a few decades ago. That's how detailed and comprehensive his maps were. So, an extraordinary man who was married, and unlike many of his compatriots, was faithful to his wife through his entire life. Even when he was away in places like Tahiti, where a lot of the men mixed it up with the natives. So a man of great self-discipline and obviously brought a lot to our world.
Yeah, no, I haven't read that. I'm going to put that on my list. The 5 dysfunctions of the team is one of the key things I coach. In fact, if I bear with me, I'm going to just turn my background off for a second. I have that background because you never know how tidy or untidy my office is. I've just rearranged it so it's currently untidy. But there is this is a work companion to the book, the Facilitator's Guide.
Yeah, I've got mine on my desk.
Yeah, and this is it is bringing leadership teams and companies together. Dysfunctions, trust, accountability, etc. It is a phenomenal model. And the other one, Stephen Covey, of course. If you were to get a look into my my project management system, the two key things are, because I only discovered this a couple of years ago. He took one of the things about all these thought leaders, of course, is they package everybody else's work up as well. But he took what was called the Eisenhower matrix, which is something general during the Second World War, and the urgent, important, urgent, not important, which is all about working on the problem, and that's the way to this day my project management system's set up.
Yeah, look, it's so I've got it on my desk. I'm going to read it again. I only finished it probably 6 or 8 weeks ago, but I made a lot of notes out of it. But I'm going to go back and read it again because I find on the second time round you just pick up that little bit more. So if you ever want your an assessment done on your leadership team, Ian, give me a scream because I've got all that put together, and it is extraordinarily useful. And anybody that hasn't read Patrick Lencioni's stuff, he writes books in the form of fable, so they're very easy reads as well. Yeah, no, it's great. I loved it. So,
and he's got some really the dysfunctions of a CEO, the dysfunctions of a leadership team. There's a I've got the name. It's a yellow book, one about families, which is really good. Building values, not building, but working out what the values of your family are and how that works. So he's an excellent thought leader. Any last piece of advice or parting words for an entrepreneur or an aspiring entrepreneur out there?
Yeah, look, I think probably my biggest failing is something I'd do differently again is plan a lot earlier for succession. At the moment, I don't. My succession plan is very incomplete, and I've got another business in the insurance broking space as well. I've got a slightly better succession plan there, but in the valuation business, it's been a real challenge to build a succession plan, and that's because, as I mentioned, so many of the staff come through, if you like, they're blue collar backgrounds. They fall into the profession as opposed to selecting it, and as a result, they've got their goals and aspirations are probably modest in comparison to mine, and the thought of taking on the risk of directorships and shareholdings is quite challenging. And being a professional services business, it's about personal relationships. So trying to find like-minded people in our industry, which is very small in that plant and equipment side, not so much on the property side, but on the plant and equipment side has been a big challenge. And I wish I'd given it thought a lot earlier than I did. Whether I find a solution to that before I retire, which might be in 5, maybe 10 years, I'll just see how I go. I feel young and I'm very driven at the moment to continue growing, and I bought a practice in the healthcare space last year. I'm still looking at acquisitions for our business, but at some point, obviously, you could get struck down with cancer tomorrow or whatever. I don't really have a plan to actually progress the business from that point. So that's probably to get started early and talk to Jonathan, someone like yourself. I'm not saying that just because you're across there, but you need somebody independent to help you through that process. So I don't think you can do it on your own, and you certainly can't use another member of your team to do it. So it has to be somebody external and somebody who understands that process. I think it's really important. I think going back to the issue of paying staff, I've always had this thing, particularly probably for the first 15 years of my working life, that you couldn't possibly pay someone more than you were paying yourself. And there are at least 2 people in the business that actually on a salary basis, in fact 3 that earn more money than I do, and I pay gladly now because they either reduce my stress substantially or they make me a lot of money. So I think we've just got to get over this thing about, where remuneration sits. At the moment, we've got very high inflation and certainly there's a lot of pressure on wages. So don't lose your key staff for the sake of 15 or 20%. If you're in doubt, go and have a chat with them, see what they're thinking, and put the money up early rather than waiting until that, the resignation that is dropped on your desk, and then you want to take probably very dire action in terms of trying to get them back, and that's often very difficult. It's very hard to do that.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, once again, great advice. It's one of those things that I work with clients all the time about. It's my coach who's Dan Sullivan out of the US talks a lot about this concept of self-managing company. And, what you've just done is put a couple of pieces together. He talks about your unique ability. My unique ability is putting frameworks and tools together easy, keep it simple, to help, and then helping advise and coaching CEOs to grow their business. That's my unique ability. But there's so much other stuff out there that is not my unique ability, and it's all about, which is the point you essentially made, hiring people with those unique abilities to complement you.
Absolutely.
And then positioning the company. For any company for them to grow, you need a succession plan, because it's about giving. Like, my day today has been quite interesting. I'm in a classic working from next door situation. I'm in a nice shirt. I've got shorts on because I've been working in the garden all day with Marty, who's one of my my team in my property business, and my children, while we've been doing this, have just got home or got into the office in the meeting room here. But I'm so looking forward to going out, because I spent a stupid amount of money buying a monkey bar thing for them. And typical of my unique ability, could I put the bloody thing together? No, I couldn't. Therefore, I got Marty over to help me for 4 hours putting this bloody thing together this morning. Your unique ability, but I will. But my other unique ability is doing what I'm doing right now, talking to you and talking to CEOs. But I know what is not my unique abilities, and I surround myself with people who do that for me. This video will be edited by Vitaly who lives in the Ukraine. That's another story.
But it'll end up as a 2-minute event, mate.
Yes. Building that self-managing company, positioning a company for sale, even though you've got no intention of selling, is one of the things I do in the 2 or 3 year process when I'm with CEOs, because it's, as you said, or something like that, you need to have the business set up if you want to, that it lives without you and can breathe without you. Now, listen, Ian, thank you for that. I want to translate a little bit now. Let's talk a bit about your charity work and what you're doing, and just give us a little couple of minutes. Yeah, sure.
Look, well, I was raised in a family where, even though my father came to this country with not very much money back in the late 40s, where no one ever knocked on the door and got turned away if they were raising money. It might have only been a very small donation. But irrespective, whoever knocked on the door always got a donation. I grew up in that environment. My father, when we were old enough, each one of us were enrolled in the Red Shield Appeal, the Red Cross Appeal, and we'd be dropped down to the local school to pick up our gear and go walk in the streets collecting money for those and various other organisations. So when the business started, and I was an accountant, I had no valuation or auction skills at that stage. And my brother suggested after a few months that I would need to become an auctioneer, and I said no. We talked about this. So I'm not going to become an auctioneer. And he said, no, you're going to need to. So anyway, after a year of badgering me, I said, okay, I'll do it. So look, auctioneering is a very interesting pastime, because if you're, and I know this will be hard for you to believe, I was actually quite a shy person, and, which doesn't really compute now, and I've probably done more auctions than anyone else in the country. But my brother said, look, why don't you approach a few charities and see if you can do some charity auctions for them? That will help you get your confidence up and so on. So I said, okay, that's not a bad idea. So I wrote a letter and I mailed it out. I think at the time there were 700 registered charities in New South Wales. I sent a letter to every charity that I could get an address from out of the old white pages, yellow pages.
Yep.
And said, look, I'm a young up-and-coming auctioneer. If you need a charity auctioneer, an auctioneer for one of your charity auctions, I'd be more than happy to come along and do it. So for probably about a decade, I did 2-3 auctions a month, sometimes a few more. And for many, many charities, probably over 100 charities during that time. One of those charities I worked with was Special Olympics. And I remember when I did my first event for them, I saw these wonderful young intellectually disabled athletes, but they were so physically capable and wonderful. And I went along to a few sporting events where they had, they also tried to raise some money or did raise some money. I thought it was fantastic. Fast forward to 1993, and I have a son with Down syndrome. So at that time, when he was born, we had 3 under 3, and he had some serious health issues. I didn't understand Down syndrome. I didn't really know what it was up until that point. But I immediately knew that I had to learn more and I had to get involved. So he was born in May. In August, I got elected to the board of the Down Syndrome Association. And that began what has been probably the most uplifting journey that I could ever have imagined. And the joy of working with people with special needs, some of whom also who have physical disabilities as well, has been very special. And that year that Alistair was born, I ran my first fundraising lunch down at the rugby club. We had the princely sum of 6 tables, 60 people, and Peter Fenton, who was a former legendary rugby coach, agreed to be our MC for nothing and speaker, MC and speaker. And we auctioned off a couple of his books, and we had a couple of other things we auctioned off, and I think we raised $9,000, which was more money than the Down Syndrome Association had ever raised in a year, let alone in one event. And it went from there. So those events spread to other states, so to Brisbane and Melbourne over the years, and I've also run them in Canberra and also over in Perth. And they went to also expanded into golf days and gala dinners, and I've been on the board of a lot of different not-for-profit organisations and tried to help them, with their plans, with their strategic goals, and also help them fund their vision. So look, it's just been a great journey. As I said, I've learned a lot. I've worked with some fantastic people, absolutely amazing people. People that have children with special needs are very special. The parents are generally very special themselves. And a lot of our friends today have children with special needs, not because Alistair, our boy, he doesn't mix with them, but they're just great people. So we love spending time with them and being with them. They're very considerate. They give back to the community. And that's really the story. So we continue on. We raised $700,000 this year for 4 charities, and we'll be back on deck for will be our 30th year next year. So we started our first event in 1993. 2023 will be our 30th year of running events. So I feel every one of those years.
So where, if someone wanted help, where do they go? How do they get on the list?
Sorry, I missed that.
If someone wants to help or get on the list, how do they?
Look, Jonathan, I'd love to talk to them. We're always looking for committee members. It's not onerous. We don't.
Done.
Excellent. Well, I'd love to have you there.
Okay.
Welcome to our newest committee member. But fundamentally, it's a meeting once a month. You can come in via Teams if you're a way away, or if you happen to be in the city, both in Melbourne and Brisbane as well. You can join physically. We have physical meetings. We start the meetings about 7 months beforehand, just monthly. Obviously, after 30 years, we've got a pretty good formula. Probably 75 to 80% of the people that come back, that come each year, are people that have been to the lunches before and taken tables before.
Just remind me the name of the organisation. So
in Sydney, it's Anala and CNS Precision Assembly. So Anala has residential accommodation, long-term residential accommodation for people with special needs. They also have 5 respite care centres, day respite care centres around Sydney. CNS Precision Assembly is based at Hornsby. It's an employment program for about 20 people with intellectual disabilities, and my son works there. In Melbourne, it's Bailey House. They also provide employment, long-term accommodation, and day respite care, and in Brisbane at Self Enterprises, which is massive. They have 400 disabled workers working for them out of a workforce of 1,300 people. It's huge, but they do everything from running horse riding programs for the disabled to they've got an engineering shop for completely deaf people. I remember going through there the first time, thinking to myself, this is a massive OH&S risk, and I was trying to get the attention of the bloke who was doing the tour with me to say, mate, you've really, because we do a bit of work in the OH&S space, I said, mate, this is very dangerous. You've really got to deal with this. And he said, mate, just have a look. The next thing I'm looking at, these guys are all signing to each other. They're all 100% deaf people. So they didn't need to worry about, headphones or hearing, noise deadening earmuffs or whatever. So, but yeah, they do a whole range of stuff for both physically and intellectually disabled people. So anyone that would like to be involved across the country, or if you'd like to donate money, or alternatively, if you've got something, a holiday house you'd like to donate for a week, all of our prizes are donated. All of our speakers speak for free. All of our MCs turn up for nothing. Every one of our venues, we've got the lowest rates of anyone at any of the venues. All of our wine's donated. In Sydney, our beer is donated. All of our raffle prizes are donated. Our auction prizes are donated. So we literally return about 75% of every dollar that we raise. The only thing we pay for is the food costs and the venue costs. The rest of it all goes back to the charities, and then we trace and make sure that where they tell us they're going to spend that money, it actually gets spent there. And as a result,
and if you send me links to the websites, I'll add it to the show notes.
Thank you very much. That's much appreciated. I'll do that.
Yeah. No, very happy to. Ian, thank you so much. I always enjoy our chats.
Jonathan, absolutely, mate. Thank you so much too. And I'll let you know the first meeting is probably going to be for Sydney will be probably next month, mid to late December. So there's probably a date already set, but my PA's probably just locked it in my diary. So I'll let you know.
Yeah, please. I look forward to it. And look, I'm sorry to everybody who's following here. You may get one email from me. It won't be spam, but certainly promoting it.
Well, let's have a chat. But most certainly, I'd be very interested in doing something on this. So maybe next year we're going to think about doing some kind of a leadership. Do our own assessment of our leadership team.
Lovely. I'd love to do that. So, Ian, listen, thank you again. I really enjoyed the conversation. There's some fabulous gems in there for anybody listening, so really appreciate that. And look forward to talking again soon. Now, if anybody, just wrapping up, I hope you enjoyed the stories of scaling up. This is, I've been speaking to Ian Hyman from Hymans Auctioneers. If you're a CEO of an SME and would like to be interviewed in this series, please email me at jonathan@scaleupgrowth.com.au. It's in the show notes. And I'd love to have a chat to you about that. But thank you, Ian, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, man. Appreciate it.
Yes.